in. Here it is. And Mark started to us. Stacy, can you count to 10, please?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Okay. Stacy, we have to use this mic instead of the lavalier for you, okay? Are you okay with that?
Did you ever want to be a reporter?
I'm Paris Schutz. Thanks for joining us on this Thursday, October 31st. Coming up on Chicago Tonight, the U.S. House votes to formalize the impeachment inquiry into President Trump. How everyday citizens can discover new planets and take part in scientific research. Previewing the Bears-Eagles matchup, plus Sunset Boulevard and other theater reviews with Hedy Weiss. But first tonight, the Chicago teacher strike is over. Here's our Amanda Vinicky to explain what finally brought an end to the 11-day standoff.
But we have an agreement, and teachers will be back in class, and students will be back in class tomorrow.
It had seemed like school would be back in session today after Chicago Teachers Union leadership yesterday signed off on new contract terms. Instead, teachers were back on the picket lines today over a final dispute. Would CPS extend the school year to make up for the 11 school days lost to the strike as CTU wanted, or not, as the mayor and CPS CEO Janice Jackson had said from the onset? They softened some this morning.
Many families have already begun to make plans for the summer. If we make up all of these days, school would extend until the end of June, going into July. We have had enough disruption this year. It's time to get our kids back to class and to give our parents, students, and families the normalcy that they deserve.
What I'm not willing to do is a take it or leave it unilateral demand, which is what they've given. I haven't heard anything new from them. I have no sense that they are willing to compromise. If they want to come to the table in a spirit of compromise, I'm certainly willing to listen.
While outside, teachers were gathering to march around City Hall in protest.
The question of how we get back into the schools is part of the negotiations, and it's standard. Just because the mayor has been going around for the last 4 weeks saying, you know, I'm not doing nothing, the mayor said a lot of things that she's not going to do that she subsequently turned around and done.
Sharkey, though, also said there was room for compromise. He then went to the mayor's office to talk, and after a private meeting,
In a spirit of compromise, we agreed. It was a hard-fought discussion. Took us a lot of time to get there, but I think this is the right thing ultimately for our city, and I'm glad that this phase is over. So we need to get back to work. We need to get our kids back.
CPS will make up 5 of the 11 school days missed.
Made up. It's not just about money. It's about doing the right thing for the children. They still need those days in front of a teacher.
The deal means striking teachers will lose 6 days worth of pay, but their new 5-year contract will guarantee them more money down the road. They'll get 16% raises in that time. They've also secured minimal health insurance increases, 1 nurse and 1 social worker per school, class size relief, sanctuary school protections, and support for homeless students.
We've learned a lot through this process, and I'm grateful that it's over. I'm grateful that we've got a 5-year deal, and it's time for us to move on and focus on our kids. And I look forward to watching Simeon on Saturday play and be victorious.
Union leaders say the contract itself gives teachers wins, but they aren't thrilled with today's deal. They refused the mayor's offer to announce it jointly.
People get to return to work. We've been wanting, frankly, it's been hard on teachers to be out this long. And it's been hard on parents to be out this long. It's been hard on our students. And so, I just didn't feel like doing a celebration lap with the mayor right now. That's not what our members need to be looking at. That's not what the people of the city need to be seeing.
In the history of return to work agreements, you are never docked these many days. And you all can check the information on this. We were pushed up against a wall.
After joining teachers on their snowy final strike day, fourth grader Esme Daku closers ready to get back to school. These past 11 days have been
pretty boring. School is actually really fun if you actually pay attention.
It also means, as the sports-loving mayor alluded to, Chicago Public Schools football teams won't have to forfeit playoff games. Lightfoot's not done with labor battles, though. She's got to negotiate a contract with the police union next. And now, while we're talking about it, like everything with the CTU and CPS is final, that isn't quite the case, Paris. Teachers do still need to ratify this contract. They have 10 school days to vote, and the union hasn't said yet when that voting will begin.
And will it pass?
I mean, more than likely, yes. It would be pretty crazy after all of this for teachers to, go back on strike, and yet there's still no actual guarantee. There are certainly some unsatisfied teachers. If you look at that House of Delegates vote from last night, the breakdown was 60-40.
And we're going to ask our next guest about just that and a lot more. Amanda, thank you very much.
Of course.
And now we turn to the Chicago Teachers Union leadership. Joining us from CTU headquarters in the West Loop are CTU President Jesse Sharkey and Vice President Stacey Davis Gates, sitting down there after, no doubt, a long strike. Jesse Sharkey, you called this deal monumental. What do you believe was gained for students and teachers as a result of your walkout?
There are a lot of improvements that we're going to see in the schools. For example, we see guarantees for staffing, social workers, nurse in every school. We've seen equity, investment in equity. So many of the schools that are in the poorest neighborhoods who have the most difficult conditions are going to see relief first. Some of that's going to come in the form of homeless coordinators for students, also class size relief. So there's really a lot of things in there which we think are going to make our schools better.
Stacey Davis Gates, how do teachers feel about restoring 5 of the 11 lost days instead of all 11 as you had asked for?
Listen, our teachers took a monumental sacrifice to bring our students equity and justice, and they should not be punished for doing what teachers do every day. As I said earlier today, our teachers are warriors. They're protectors of our students, and they put forth an audacious effort to bring a social worker and a nurse to the class, to the school community every single day. That should not be a punishment. In fact, that should be something that we embrace, that we high five, and that we celebrate together.
And Jesse Sharkey, you alluded to this earlier. You didn't want to appear jointly with Mayor Lightfoot to announce this resolution. Is there some lingering bad blood here with the mayor?
This isn't really about the mayor. This is about our members, 25,000 teachers, social workers, other clinicians, support staff, joined by the members of SEIU, so also bus aides, a number of other staff, basically went on strike, lost pay in order to make a better school contract. They still have to ratify that contract. They still have to take vote about whether or not that represents their final agreement. So it's not an appropriate time to be standing there with the mayor. It's a time to be talking to our members about what we've achieved and what we still have to fight to make better in the schools.
Are you certain that the majority of your membership is going to vote to ratify this contract?
I'm not certain about anything. This is a democratic union, famously so. People sometimes assume that when the CTU brings things back to the House, that somehow Stacey and me sort of call the shots there, and nothing could be further from the truth. We heard a lot of members whose aspirations are high. We talk about class size relief. There's going to be important class size relief in this document, but it's still not going to be perfect. And people want the best for their students in schools, and we heard that from our members. there are things we weren't able to achieve. So I think when we weigh everything on balance, I do think members will find this to be a real achievement and an improvement in the schools. I think it's one of the best contracts we've had in a long time. But that doesn't mean that it's necessarily going to sail through, because people continue to want more, and I'm actually okay with that, and I'm going to keep listening and trusting our members.
And it certainly didn't sail through the House of Delegates, which had to vote to accept this contract. The vote was 364 to 242. Stacey Davis Gates, what do you make of that divide in the House of Delegates of the CTU?
We had 9 members who were arrested the day before. Members who have put their very households on the line to fight for our school communities. We were on top of a mountain fighting for things that are basic minimums in most places. And so there was an emotional charge in our house. Our members are highly educated, well-read individuals who have lots of questions. Look, if our democracy in Chicago was as democratic as it is in our House of Delegates, we may have a different Chicago.
Jesse Sharkey, there was some anger, and there was a lot, from what I understand, a lot of heated rhetoric at that meeting. Do you think that maybe you overpromised some of your members? Maybe you promised more to them than you could ultimately deliver?
We raised expectations, because that's what unions that are trying to transform schools and make our city a better place, that's what we do. You don't get people inspired to make change by telling them, maybe you can have an extra quarter an hour on your wages. You inspire people to make changes by talking about a vision of a school where students get the schools they deserve, by talking about a city where there's racial equity, by talking about people who should be able to have dignity and respect at work. And so, yeah, expectations are high, and we're going to require people a while to weigh out and think about what we were able to achieve by fighting as hard as we could for 10 days. People aren't making up all the time. People are going to sacrifice their checks for this. And so I expect emotions to be high, but the meeting was respectful, and it was an incredible meeting. And I wish everyone could see what real democracy in a union and in a workplace looks like.
Stacey Davis Gates, were your members squeezed by this November 1st deadline where they would have lost their health insurance and had to purchase some sort of COBRA coverage?
Look, I think a lot is being made over the constraints that were placed in front of us by the mayor. But they've been there for quite some time. Since 1995, our school communities have been largely marginalized and made inequitable. That being said, our members have been on the forefront of fighting for exactly what our students need for a very long time. The threats didn't scare them before they took a strike authorization vote. The threats didn't scare them when they went to the picket line. In fact, they found their power on the picket line. The mayor even admitted that she didn't start bargaining with us until our members hit the picket line. So their power was felt both internally and externally. So, we make a lot about nothing.
Jesse Sharkey, Stacey Davis Gates, we know it's been a long few weeks, and we thank you for joining us.
Thank
you.
City and CPS officials, but they declined our invitation for tonight. And up next, explaining what lies ahead for the impeachment process as the House passes the impeachment inquiry measure today. Stay with us.
This evening's presentation of Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by North Shore University Health System.
Here's to the end of illness and the beginning of how healthcare should be. At North Shore, we're transforming your healthcare by analyzing your DNA to identify future health risks for you and working to stop illness before it begins. When you're a North Shore patient, your advanced primary care physician makes the latest genetic science part of your everyday care to keep you healthier longer. Advanced primary care. Here's to taking control of your health and taking on what's next.
By a 232 to 196 vote split almost exactly along party lines, the U.S. House passed a resolution outlining rules and next steps for the impeachment inquiry into the actions of President Donald Trump. Last month, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi launched an impeachment probe centered on whether or not Trump abused his powers by seeking help from Ukraine to undermine his political rival, Joe Biden.
Sadly, this is not any cause for any glee or comfort.
It is not just devoid of solutions for the American people. It is now abusing its power to discredit democracy.
Certainly both parties have different takes on this measure today. Here to tell us more about the impeachment inquiry resolution is Stephen Heyman, professor of law at the IIT Chicago-Kent College of Law. Professor Heyman, thanks for being with us.
Thanks very much for having me.
What is the significance of this vote today?
This vote did two critical things. The first one is that it affirmed the impeachment inquiry that Speaker Pelosi announced about 5 weeks ago and showed that it has the support of a majority of the House of Representatives. The second thing that it did is to lay out a roadmap going forward for what the process is going to look like.
And tell us about that roadmap.
Beginning as soon as the week of November 11th, the House Intelligence Committee is going to go public with the hearings. So up until this point, they've been interviewing witnesses, they've been taking depositions, gathering evidence. And the Republicans have been complaining that that's all been happening behind closed doors. In a couple of weeks, they're going to have public hearings that will be televised and where the whole American people will be able to see what's going on.
Certainly the Republicans and President Trump have complained about what they see is the legitimacy of the impeachment probe. Was this vote necessary to legitimize an impeachment inquiry?
Not in a legal sense. There's nothing in the Constitution or the rules of the House of Representatives that requires the full House to vote in order to authorize an impeachment inquiry. But from a political standpoint, the inquiry will sort of carry more weight now that it actually has been formally approved by the entire House.
And some of these rules that they set in place, one of them says the majority party here in the Judiciary Committee, they can essentially veto a witness that the minority party, the Republicans, call. Is that standard practice in an inquiry like this?
Yeah, it is. I think that those rules are very much the same as they were during the Clinton impeachment, for example, 20 years ago when the Republicans were running the show.
And the president today tweeted that this, he says, quote, the greatest witch hunt or hoax in American history. Republicans have called the process, all right, witch hunt, there you go. I knew it was one of the two. The Republicans have called the process unconstitutional. They say it has lacked transparency. Do you find any part of this process unconstitutional thus far?
No, absolutely not. The Constitution provides that the House shall have the sole power of impeachment and says that each House has the power to determine its own rules. And what the House has been doing is sort of very standard for investigating a situation like this.
And another one of the rules, I mean, essentially is saying that the president's lawyer can call witnesses if they comply with subpoenas that the House Judiciary Committee brings forward. But if they don't do that, well, you know, you got to play ball if you want your witnesses called. Is that pretty standard?
This is, I would say, an unprecedented situation. In previous impeachment inquiries, the president did not completely stonewall the inquiry and cooperated more than President Trump has been doing.
So this is a mechanism to try and get the president to cooperate, you believe?
Yeah, that's right. From the very beginning, Speaker Pelosi and Chairman Schiff have said that if the president refuses to allow witnesses to testify, if he refuses to comply with subpoenas and provide evidence that's been requested by the committee, then they will take that as evidence of possibly another article of impeachment, which is obstruction, contempt of Congress.
How strong are the enforcement powers of Congress in enforcing subpoenas and compelling witnesses to testify?
From a legal standpoint, Congress is on very strong ground for subpoenaing at least most of the witnesses and demanding most of the evidence that they've asked for. There are some open legal questions about the president's very closest advisors and whether they can be required to testify or not. But the president has been refusing to allow testimony not only by his closest advisors, but in fact by anybody in the executive branch. From a legal standpoint, Congress probably probably does have a very strong claim to have them testify.
But a court has to enforce it if they're refusing.
That's exactly right.
And it could go all the way up to the Supreme Court?
Yes, and that could take a very long time to be litigated all the way up to the Supreme Court, which is why the House, I think, very sensibly has decided that they're not going to wait for the whole for these cases to work their way all the way through the courts, but instead, I think that they feel that they have enough evidence already that they can go ahead with the process.
The way that the rules for each chamber have been described is akin to the House is a grand jury putting the case together. The Senate is the trial where there's a defense and a prosecution. Is that about right?
Yeah, I think that's a great way to put it. And that helps to explain why, at least up until this point, most of the investigation that the House has been doing has been behind closed doors. It's the same way in a grand jury.
And you say, they've said the transcripts will be made public and there will be open hearings. Tell us the next steps in the impeachment process before it goes over to the Senate.
The House will probably take about a week to continue to do depositions behind closed doors as they have been doing. Beginning maybe the week of November the 11th, they will have these public hearings. The Intelligence Committee is going to be the one that does the hearings. So Adam Schiff on the Democratic side and Devin Nunes on the Republican side will be leading that investigation. After the public hearings, the Intelligence Committee will write a report. And they will detail their factual findings. They will send that, as well as the supporting evidence, over to the House Judiciary Committee, which may hold further public hearings. And as you said, at that point, the president would have the ability to call witnesses of his own if he wanted to. And then the House Judiciary Committee will debate and then vote on proposed articles of impeachment, which would then go to the full House of Representatives for a debate and a vote.
All right. Stephen Heyman, professor at IIT Chicago-Kent College of Law, thank you very much.
Thanks so much.
And there's more Chicago Tonight just ahead, so please stay with us.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by Allstate. Allstate is investing in Chicago's youth. We believe good starts young. That's why we're helping our youth develop the skills they need to achieve success in life. Allstate is proud to empower the next generation of leaders.
And here's more of what's making news in Chicago tonight. Another Illinois resident has died as a result of a vaping-related illness. This according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention and the Illinois Department of Public Health. That makes 3 deaths total in Illinois from e-cigarettes and 37 across the country. Since March, 1,888 people have come down with vaping-related lung illness, including 166 in Chicago. State health officials are still working with the CDC to determine the root cause, but more than 80% of patients who got sick in Illinois reported using products containing THC, the chemical that gives marijuana its high. And we have more information on this on our website. If you recently purchased apples at the grocery store, you may want to check the label before taking a bite. The FDA and a Michigan-based company called North Bay Produce have announced the recall of nearly 2,300 cases of apples that have been shipped to 8 states, including Illinois. The recalled varieties include McIntosh, Honeycrisp, Jonathan, Fuji, Jonamac, and Red Delicious. The FDA says the apples may have a listeria contamination, although there are no reported cases of illnesses as a result of these apples just yet. The Halloween snowstorm is causing some travel headaches at Chicago's airports. O'Hare is reporting 207 cancellations and average delays of 81 minutes. Midway is reporting 126 cancellations and a 27-minute average flight delay. Travelers are urged to visit flychicago.com or check in with their flight to get up-to-date information. And that snow is supposed to be tapering off this evening, otherwise mostly cloudy with a low of 24. And then tomorrow, cloudy with a high near 40. And still to come on Chicago Tonight, enter the Zooniverse, where regular citizens can participate in big-time scientific research. Can the Bears get back on track when they face the Eagles in a rematch of last season's playoff loss? Former Bear James Big Cat Williams previews the matchup. The surprising story of a young woman's passion for taxidermy and for its power to ignite a love of nature. reimagining Lenny Bruce plus Sunset Boulevard and more stage reviews with Hedy Weiss. But first, some of today's top business headlines from Cranes. Here's Stephanie Goldberg.
Thanks, Paris. The Securities and Exchange Commission has opened an investigation of Exelon and ComEd's lobbying activities. The U.S. Attorney's Office in Chicago also is probing the lobbying practices of the two companies in Illinois. At the same time, Exelon CEO Chris Crane told analysts that the company will shutter as many as 4 Illinois plants if wide-ranging energy legislation isn't passed to increase ratepayer subsidies. In addition to the previously identified Byron, Braidwood, and Dresden plants, Crane said Exelon is prepared to close its LaSalle power station if Springfield doesn't come through next spring. Meanwhile, Outcome Health has agreed to a $70 million settlement with the Department of Justice. Once a high-flying startup, raising nearly $500 million from investors, the company sold advertising to drug makers on a network of TV screens in doctors' offices. According to the Justice Department, Outcome admits to defrauding advertisers by selling inventory it didn't have. Despite the settlement, the federal investigation is ongoing. Finally, ride-hailing Uber is suing Skokie over new taxes, alleging they violate state law. The Skokie tax, adopted in May, charges a flat fee of 35 cents for each individual trip and 15 cents for each shared ride that begins or ends in the north suburb. The tax resembles Mayor Lori Lightfoot's proposal to expand ride-hailing taxes in Chicago, cutting congestion downtown and raising as much as $40 million a year to improve city finances. For Crane's Chicago Business and chicagobusiness.com, I'm Stephanie Goldberg. Back to you, Paris.
Thanks, Stephanie. You don't need an advanced degree or really any sort of schooling to participate in big-time scientific research. That's because there's an online site called Zooniverse. It's like a crowdsource that asks everyday citizens to work on studies that range from finding new galaxies to mitigating climate change. Zooniverse is the world's largest platform that connects researchers with citizen scientists. It has more than 1.8 million registered users worldwide, and that includes around 18,000 Chicagoans. Joining us now to tell us more are two people intimately involved in the project: Laura Truey, Vice President of Citizen Science at Adler Planetarium, and Chris Lintott, Professor of Astrophysics at Oxford University and the main presenter on the BBC's long-running astronomy show, The Sky at Night. Lintott has also just authored a new book, The Crowd and the Cosmos: Adventures in the Zooniverse. Welcome, both of you, to Chicago Tonight. Laura Truey, explain, what exactly is Zooniverse?
So Zooniverse is how we're working with researchers across the fields who have these huge data sets, million galaxies or million images of cells for cancer research, and inviting the public to help those researchers unlock those data. So it's people-powered research. How can you engage the public in meaningful ways in the research and help those researchers actually get to the really interesting research questions that are there, but first need that data processing to be done.
And so we describe this as kind of like a crowdsourcing for scientific research. Chris Lintott, how did this platform come about?
Well, we had one of those everyday problems. We just had too many galaxies to sort out, which many of your viewers...
There's a few of them out there.
Exactly. In fact, we had 1 million images of galaxies, and we tried getting a student to look at them and sort them out. He looked at 50,000 and then came and had a quiet word. So we put them online and discovered that actually there are people out there who want to help science. It's a rather reassuring thought, I think, that there's a crowd of people on the internet who are happy to spend their spare time helping us discover stuff about the universe. And you don't need, as you said in your introduction, any background. We'll teach you what you need, and we can show you the universe and show you things that people haven't ever seen before.
And Laura Truey, you've been involved with citizen science at the Adler Planetarium. First of all, tell us what citizen science is.
So we like to refer to it as people-powered research. It's engaging the public in real and meaningful and valued ways in real research. So whether it's classifying galaxies or identifying planets around distant stars or marking structures in cells for cancer research or mapping where giant kelp forests are for climate science, or even transcribing handwritten historical documents. It's all about some kind of pattern recognition task that 5-year-olds to 95-year-olds can do, and it helps those researchers then move forward with actually digging into the questions.
So pattern recognition, you're asking the users sort of detect patterns to determine things like, oh, there's a new galaxy right there. So Chris Lintott, we're going to take a look at some video of some of these projects on Zooniverse. First of all, the Galaxy Zoo. Tell us about Galaxy Zoo.
So this is a sort of census of the galaxy galaxies in the nearby universe. You're looking here at galaxies from a visualization we created for a Kavli show we're doing at the planetarium. But each of these galaxies is a few 100 million light years away. Each of them has a few 100 billion stars. But the shape of each galaxy, whether it's a spiral or an elliptical, tells you its history. It tells you about how it's interacted with its surroundings. And that's what we need to get out of these images. We can only do that by having people look at these things and tell us what they see.
So you need people to determine whether it's a spiral or an elliptical.
Maybe whether there's a bar at the center.
So what's the difference? What is it telling us about these guys?
So in general, spirals live relatively calmer lives. Our Milky Way, our own galaxy, is a spiral, and it's sort of in the celestial suburbs. It's lived out its life fairly quietly. It's still forming stars. Ellipticals might be the product of big mergers of products of galaxies smashing together, something that might happen to us in a few billion years, incidentally. So we're also trying to work out what the fate of our own galaxy will be.
A few billion, hopefully there'll be news around to cover that
I'm sure you'll still be here.
Yeah, Laura, truly, okay, supernova discovery, tell us about this.
So for that one, as part of this Kavli lecture, we'll be talking about how as long as you have many eyes on the data, you're going to see the weird, the unusual, the unexpected. That particular image was M82, one of a relatively nearby galaxy. And here we're zooming in on where the supernova exploded. So that's a massive star that reached the end of its life, imploded in on itself, and then exploded into leaving behind this sort of supernova remnant. So
and when this happens, I'm just going to say a single star can outshine a whole galaxy. So you see this as a new star appearing in the galaxy. And if we can spot it quickly enough with the help of our volunteers, then we can get telescopes around the world to follow up on these discoveries.
So like the birth of a new star,
the death of a star. But we use these things, for example, to measure the expansion of the universe. So the fate of the universe or our understanding of the fate of the universe depends on finding enough of these things.
Okay, so we're going to do a test now. We're all going to try. We're all going to be part of this citizen science experiment. We're going to discover new planets, exoplanets, planets outside of our solar system. So, Chris, explain how this project works.
Sure. Well, we've got data from a NASA satellite called TESS, which is scanning the sky, and it's measuring the brightness of tens of thousands of stars. And what we're looking for is a dip in brightness that might happen because a planet gets in front of its parent star.
So that's how you detect whether there's a planet there, because there's a dip in the brightness.
That's right. So and if you see a pattern of repeated dips, well, then you can be confident there's a planet there. So this project, you've picked the least photogenic project. It does allow you to discover a planet, but it is looking at graphs for fun. So here we are.
So here we go.
So this is the brightness of one star over the course of about a month. And we're looking for sharp dips.
So there's a bunch of dips.
There are. So mostly that's this star is an old star. It's pulsing, so it's going up and down. But do you see there's a couple of points where the brightness suddenly dips very sharply?
Yeah. So that means that's when the planet's crossing.
That could well be a planet. Now, if you got that off the site this morning, that might be a new planet. We just put new data up.
We just discovered a new planet right here.
There you go.
Let's take a look at another one. Laura, what are we? Let's see. I see some discernible dips there. Well, there's that big dip in the middle where there's nothing. What is that?
So that's the satellite having an off day.
Oh, okay.
So there are times when it has to move its position or so on.
What do you think, Laura?
Well, so key is that every one of these images is looked at by many of our volunteers. And so sometimes there's this concern that, oh, what if I get it wrong?
Right.
But because there's 45 other people who are going to look at this particular image, and every single one of them, then if 44 out of 45 say, oh yeah, I see those two dips, and those are likely planets passing in front of the star.
I see two dips there. There's planets.
Okay, we'll record that. We'll show it to 40 more people, and then we'll get back to you.
All right, let's look at one more.
Let's see. Let's have the last one. Oh, that's interesting.
There's those little lines.
Those could be dips. That's something. You can tell that's going round about once every 4 days or something. So that would be something very close to the star. Those dips are quite large, so I guess that's a smaller star actually that's getting in the way.
Possibly not a planet.
Maybe not a planet, but we'll do all the hard work. All we ask our volunteers to do is say what they see.
So I think we've discovered at least 2 new planets here. So Laura, I'll get back to the fact that if it's people that are not experts in this, and you have 45 people saying there's a new planet, how can you rely on that? Couldn't a computer model be more reliable?
It's a great question. So with all the projects, we input or insert expert classified data so that we can compare the consensus result from the volunteers to that subset of expert classifications. And so for many of our projects like Snapshot Serengeti, where you're looking at animals across the Serengeti Desert, there 97% of the time, the consensus volunteer result agrees with the experts. And in the 3% where they don't, half of those, even the experts can't agree because it's a really distant animal and you're just seeing the tail, and who knows if that's a wildebeest or a zebra.
So there's not that big a gap between the experts and the regular citizens.
No,
when it comes
we
to
know
science.
volunteers are good at this. They're better than computers, and they're actually better than us most of the time.
All right. Well, Laura Truly, Chris Lintott, great project. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much.
And Laura Truly and Chris Lintott will be giving a lecture about the Zooniverse project at the Adler Planetarium on Friday and Saturday. Those lectures will be broadcast live to other planetaria around the world, as well as on YouTube 360. You can also find out more about the Zooniverse project on our website. And we're back with more right after this.
Don't miss one of our stories. Get them all delivered to your desktop or mobile device with a subscription to the WTTW News Daily Briefing. Go to WTTW.com/dailybriefing and sign up.
It's a rematch for the Bears on Sunday when they face the Philadelphia Eagles. The Eagles knocked the Bears out of the playoffs last season, a game that ended on a missed field goal, the now infamous double doink. Bears fans would soon like to forget that kick, but just last week they witnessed another couple of missed field goals, one that could have been the game winner. The season is rapidly slipping away from them. Can they turn it around? Joining us with a preview of the matchup is James Big Cat Williams, former Bears offensive lineman. Big Cat, welcome back as always.
Thank you.
The big topic of discussion this week was, should Coach Nagy have run an extra play to try and move that ball closer for kicker Eddie Pinheiro to nail?
Yes. I mean, I don't think there are two ways around it. I understand him being a little nervous about a possible penalty, a possible fumbling of the ball, a possible interception, but you have to, a guy that just missed a 33-yard field goal not too much earlier, you have to get him a little closer. You have to get him as close as possible. You have to have more confidence in your quarterback, in your offense.
And is there any notion or any truth to this notion that Pinheiro would have rather kicked from the right hash mark and the coach didn't realize that and they kicked from the left hash mark?
That's what he said. I mean, that's
dissension in the ranks here.
Well, that's what he came out and said, and unfortunately, you know, it shines a bad light on the Bears because, you know, that's a communication that you're supposed to have. You're supposed to know where your kicker wants to kick it from, which way the wind's blowing, and if he wanted it on a different hash and they put it on, then that's a lack of communication on the sidelines between the kicker, the special teams coach, and the head coach.
A positive from the game was running back David Montgomery finally got going, ran for over 130 yards. Can he continue that against the Eagles defense?
He can. If they continue to feed him the ball, that is going to be the key. Will they continue to give Montgomery the ball, to give him the opportunities to get warmed up? Because the later he gets into a game, most good running backs, the later they get into the game, the better they do. And with the formation they put in, bringing an extra lineman in, putting a tight end in the backfield to play fullback, that's right up Montgomery's alley. Let him follow that fullback. Get into the line of scrimmage before he makes his moves, because you see sometimes when there's no fullback in there, he likes to try and make his cut or make a spin before he gets to the line of scrimmage. But with having that guy to follow, he understood that he had to get into the line of scrimmage before he started making any adjustment, and it worked well for him.
So hopefully the head coach keeps going with those kinds of running plays. All right, to the topic that's every bit as controversial in this town as the teachers' strike. Mitch Trubisky seemed to have some really good throws, but when it counted, he made some really bad mistakes. How does he clean up those mistakes against Philadelphia?
Well, I think it's coaching. I think, you know, you were able to run the ball last week against the Chargers. You have to be able to run the ball against the Eagles. Even if it doesn't look pretty, it helps to keep the pressure off of Mitch. They need to add on to that running game. You know, you come out there with the extra lineman, you come out there, you put a tight end in the backfield. Now you've got to add some pass plays off of those runs. And that's how you get Mitch out of the pocket. You run some nakeds, you run some bootlegs, you move them around a little bit, but a lot of that will come off of the run if they can stay consistent with it.
The big problem here he is, he had some nice throws in the middle of the field between the 20-yard lines, but then once you get past the 20-yard line into the so-called red zone, the Bears were dreadful. What do they have to do to clean up that and get the ball in the end zone? I'm
going to sound like a broken record. You got to run the ball. You look at those red zone plays, and once again, they tried to get a little too fancy. You're trying to run the jet sweep to get to the outside. Bring that extra lineman back in, bring your tight end back in, and pound the ball in between the tackles. That is an opportunity for these linemen to come off the ball and make some plays. And you saw how they reacted to it last week.
You mentioned they got a little too cute, but it also didn't seem like the coach had faith in Trubisky to throw the ball in the end zone without something terrible happening.
He tried to isolate people. You saw Shaheem lined up solo on one side with 3 receivers stacked to the other side, and they're going to try and throw a route to Shaheem. And it just stopped trying to trick everybody.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Just go up there, run a little smash mouth football, put it in the hands of your young back, take some of it out of the hands of your young quarterback, and let's see how it goes.
Anything about the Eagles offense that should scare the Bears defense? I mean, there's a couple former Bears there, Alshon Jeffrey and Jordan Howard, the running back.
Well, you've got to think that Jordan Howard is going to be very pumped up for this game. This is going to be his first opportunity to play against the Bears since he left. And Jeffries is going to want to come out. Jeffrey's going to want to come out and have a big game. So you definitely have to keep an eye on those two guys. But you're talking about a guy in Wentz that has no problem with standing in the pocket, waiting for the deep ball to open up. So they're going to have to get some pass rush on him. And that's not a bad offense. They went to the Super Bowl. They're a team that you have to respect. And, they have an offensive line that's not too bad. They're a little banged up, but the Bears are going to need to get some pressure off the edge. I feel as though Floyd and Mack are going to have to be big in this game to get some pressure on Wentz to get him to get it out of his hands.
Yeah, you haven't heard their name called so much lately. All right, Big Cat, your bold prediction for this week. I'm sensing it might not be very positive.
I'm going 24-17, but I'm going Eagles this week. I just don't.
I know that's tough for you to do.
It is. It really is. But I don't know if they have enough stick-to-itiveness to stick with the run versus a pretty good Eagles defense. And with the Eagles having as many problems in the secondary as they're having, they're going to want to attack them through the air. So they might get away from the run game, and that could hurt.
All right, James Big Cat Williams, thank you as always. And you just heard Big Cat's bold prediction for the game. What's yours? Let us know on our website or social media. And while you're on our website, you can read Big Cat's 3 takes to beating the Eagles. And next week, Big Cat will join us to preview the Bears matchup with the division rival Detroit Lions. Whoever comes to mind when you think about taxidermy is probably not the person that you're about to meet. Here's Jay Shefsky with another introduction to this taxidermist.
I usually wear gloves when I work on larger animals, but with birds, they're so delicate. It helps to be able to feel where I'm sticking my hands.
Mickey Alice Quapis knows that she does not fit most people's idea of what a taxidermist looks like. She is trying to change that. And she knows that for most people, this part of taxidermy, when the insides of an animal are being removed, is the toughest to watch. But once a skin is empty and being stuffed, it begins to look almost like a plush doll.
I definitely have learned a lot more about animal anatomy than I ever thought that I would, originally wanting to be a visual artist and then becoming a taxidermist.
Mickey Alice Quapis has taxidermied parakeets and squirrels and many other mammals, birds, and reptiles. Mostly she sticks with smaller animals because she does the work in her apartment. She doesn't do hunting trophies, but has acquired a few along the way as part of a distinctive collection.
And this is the stitch that you would use on any animal, from sewing up a baby mouse to a giraffe.
So how far between stitches?
And she teaches taxidermy, mostly to millennial women, but occasionally to an aging reporter.
So about there?
She's teaching more than just taxidermy technique. She wants to share her love of animals and respect for nature.
I grew up with my mom working on a petting farm when I was a kid. And so everything that's alive has to die eventually. And it was always just like this really sad thing where we just had to bury them and that was it. And now I don't know if some of my passion for this work stems from that.
Mickey got the idea to try taxidermy when a friend asked for help with a science class dissection. With guidance from YouTube videos, her first attempt was this rat.
And it doesn't look that bad, but I got all the way done and realized I didn't have any eyes to put in it, so that's why it's curled up sleeping. I went to an estate sale and there were squirrel-sized dresses, and I bought all of them.
When Mickey started out, she would never have put a squirrel in a dress.
I wanted to do anatomically accurate taxidermy, and I thought that the anthropomorphic taxidermy was tacky or kitschy. But the more anthropomorphic taxidermy that I made and took to various art shows that I was doing, the more I was able to connect with people who thought taxidermy was gross or barbaric or unnecessary.
Both of Mickey's grandfathers were Michigan hunters. She still has the head of the bear that one grandfather bagged before she was born. Mickey does not kill any animals for her taxidermy. Still, she feels inspired by her bear hunting grandfather's philosophy. He wouldn't waste anything.
He wasn't a trophy hunter. He kept a small relic of this experience that was like a once-in-a-lifetime experience, but he made his family eat the whole bear. And so that's kind of where my mentality of wasting nothing came from. My freezer is in my room.
Okay.
Mickey coined the term sustainable taxidermy and is very careful about where she gets her animals. Some die in pet stores. Some are trapped as pests and would otherwise be disposed of. And some come from people who hunt for food. She skins the animals and sends back the meat. There may be another reason why people are often surprised that Mickey Alice Quapis is a taxidermist. Not only is she a young, non-hunting woman, she is also quite sunny, and she says people seem to think of taxidermy as dark and all about death.
I know that what I do is odd, but my goal is to normalize it because taxidermy is so important for education, for conservation, for protecting our wildlife. I hope that I can get other people involved in it too.
For Chicago Tonight, this is Jay Shefsky.
Mickey Alice Quapis has now started her own nonprofit traveling museum, mostly for kids. She brings specimens and hands-on taxidermy projects to schools. Your next chance to see her taxidermy live, so to speak, will be at a holiday market in Logan Square on December 17th. And you can learn more about that, her museum, and taxidermy classes on our website. And up next, to the theater with Hedy Weiss.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part through the generous support of the Julius Frankel Foundation.
There are many treats on Chicago stages these days. Theater critic Hedy Weiss joins us with the latest roundup. Hedy, welcome back as always.
Thank you, Paris.
Okay, so we start with I'm Not a Comedian, I'm Lenny Bruce. We had Joe Mantegno and Ronnie Marmo, the actor, on the show. They talked about how they still felt this was relevant, even though Lenny Bruce is from 40, 50 years ago. What did you think?
You know, I think it's still relevant in that you see the roots of everything that we now have in terms of stand-up comedy and social commentary and really kind of blistering use of, you know, what was called obscenities, but now is kind of dulled. But it's the performance. He really has channeled this guy, and what I think is really interesting about the show, and we'll see a little clip about it, is how he was suppressed in what he said, and that became sort of the spark that had him talk about freedom of speech and really fight for freedom of his speech. We see a little clip in which he's saying, you know, I'm not really going to be told what I can and cannot say.
Okay, from a show of hands, how many men in this room have ever had their blah blah?
And Joe Mantegna, who we also interviewed, is in the director's chair. What did he add to this production as a director?
Oh, you know, when it's a one-man show and the actor has also written it, and you never quite know, but the one thing they did do, which I think is quite brilliant, is, you know, Lenny Bruce performed in a lot of clubs, and the cabaret space at the Royal George Theatre is a perfect choice because it really makes you feel like you're sitting there, and when he interacts with the audience, it's very close up and personal, and you also see he just goes through so many different things, and obviously he was a drug addict for a good part of his life, and you see the self-destruction.
All right, next up is Latin History for Morons, featuring another one-man show.
Another one-man show.
John Leguizamo, the famous actor, and apparently he was, as a young actor, he got a boost from the Goodman Theater. Tell us about that.
Yes, he did. I still remember seeing Mambo Mouth and Spicorama, two of his early works, and I just remember he came out on this stage. I had never heard of him before, and it was like a bomb detonating. He had so much energy, and he was so fast, and he had that, you know, the New York minute, it was like the New York second, and he was brilliant. And he talked about things that also weren't talked about in terms of his Latin background, and at that time that was, you know, not a big thing. And so this play kind of, it's later, he still has that incredible gonzo energy. You can see it in the montage here, that he's a fabulous dancer. He just moves for 110 minutes.
And in your review, you kind of liken it to Monty Python type of humor.
Well, he actually even says that, you know, what he's describing, he's trying to help his kid get over bullying in school. And he's trying to tell him about his Latin history. And he's saying, you know, if you look at textbooks, there is really very little Latin history. And it shouldn't be Columbus Day, as, you know, we've been hearing lately. It should be Indigenous Peoples Day. So he goes back to the Incas and the Aztecs, and he does tell the story a little bit with a Pythonesque quality. But what he does is he really reminds people of the fact that the conquerors brought smallpox and syphilis, and we got in exchange chocolate, tomatoes, and avocado toast. So, you know, how can you beat that line?
I guess that's a fair exchange. All right, let's move on to the next show at the Windy City Playhouse, which you say practices sort of an immersive form of theater. Tell us about that.
They have two theaters, one on the north side. This is on in the South Loop, the far South Loop, and it's in a loft. And it is one of them. I'm not a big interacting kind of audience. I like that fourth wall, but they've really perfected this style. And Rebecca Spence, an actress I've seen many times, does an amazing thing because she really depends on the responses of the audience. It's not fake. She's telling about a young girl who starts at the age of 8 in a household with a mother who's very depressive, manic depressive, and she keeps a list of all the things that she loves. And this is something that recurs all through her life, through good and bad times.
And we should know the play is called Every Brilliant Thing.
Every Brilliant Thing. And that's what the list is, and eventually the list has, you know, is endless. We see a little clip here where she's with her father, who's understandably depressed, and he listens to Ray Charles records.
The way that he sings the word "you," it's like it's coming out of someone else's mouth.
As I understand, the show kind of changes from night to night.
Well, it has to, because the audience is different every night, and she kind of makes people respond, and you get a little card when you're going in with a few words on it that you have to, are cued to say at a certain point. And I saw it with a great audience. A guy even got down on his knees and proposed marriage, which I don't think every guy in the audience is going to ultimately do if they're the chosen one.
Right.
But that means she has to really be on her game every second to make things work and to just fit just enough improv. I mean, she has a script, but just enough improv to like make the whole thing cohesive.
All right, the next review you have is more of a standard. Ibsen's A Doll's House. You've seen many, many versions of this.
Many.
This one at the Writers' Theater, does it stand out to you?
It's, you know, it's a standard, and I almost dreaded going because I've seen it so many times, but it has a wonderful adaptation, and it also has a beautiful performance by a young actress named Cher Alvarez. And there's something about the way you see her mind work also, and you see all of her wiles, and you see what she has to do as a woman who has no rights, but nevertheless finds ways to finesse things. And we see a little bit here where she's doing exactly that with her husband.
You've forgotten everything I've taught you. Stop dancing.
Do you see how much I need you?
So how many productions of A Doll's House have you actually seen?
I haven't kept count, but I have to say that, you know, I've seen a variety, and this actress, you know, Nora, the role she's playing, Nora, the bourgeois housewife who's called a little squirrel and a little bird by her husband, slams the door, and that was a big thing. She leaves the family. This you really understand who she is and what life has made her.
All right, the last play we have is another standard, or a modern day standard, Sunset Boulevard, featuring Chicago staple Hollis Resnick as Norma Desmond.
Right,
So,
in the role that Gloria Swanson played in the famous movie.
so was Hollis Resnick ready for her close-up?
You know, she's been an incredible actress who does everything from musicals to Shakespeare to new plays, whatever, throughout her career. It's a long career. And she nails this. She really has that super dramatic, because she's also a musical actress, she has that super dramatic quality. And she plays, you know, a woman who is aging. And I think she's not afraid to play with that idea. And we see the famous song from this Andrew Lloyd Webber musical, With One Look, about what she could do in silent films.
When I look your way, you hear what I say. Yes, with one look, I put words to shame.
Very quickly, Hedy, this is the 25th season for Porch Light Theater. Is this a good production to open with?
You know, it is, and they have had an incredible history, and I think their move to the Ruth Page Arts Center, which is kind of on the Gold Coast, right near the water tower,
I know it well.
I think it's really changed, it's changed a lot of things for them. I think they get more tourists to come there, and also the level is just so high.
All right, Hedy Weiss, and we can read all your reviews on our website, WTTW.com. And we're back to wrap things up right after this. And that is our show for this Thursday night. Don't forget to stay connected with us by signing up for our daily briefing. And you can get Chicago Tonight streamed on Facebook, YouTube, and our website, WTTW.com/news. You can also get the show via podcast and the PBS Video app. And please join us tomorrow night at 7 for the Week in Review. And we hope everyone stays safe on the snowiest Halloween in Chicago's history. Now, for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, I'm Paris Schutz. Thank you for watching. Good night.
Closed captioning for this program is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, pleased to give back to the community through numerous charitable initiatives.